Now, for more on this story, I'm joined by our foreign affairs editor, Angela Diffley. Angela, there's a lot of talk, and it's widely expected that the Israeli military might decide on a ground offensive to send its soldiers in to Gaza. This is going to be a very tough task and a complicated one at that.
Yeah, and the Israelis usually, when there is some sort of exchange between Gaza and Israeli soldiers, avoid going into Gaza. They did in 2014, but it was quite a limited operation. The reality is that Gaza is an extremely densely populated strip, 25 miles long or so, 2.5 and more million people living in that small space. And so the risk of hitting civilians is high. And another enormous consideration now for the Israelis as well is their hostages. There are 100 or so hostages. Hamas has said we will kill them one by one if strikes continue. So that puts them in a real difficulty. That said, it is felt that the only way to halt Hamas once and for all is to send in ground troops. And so it's widely expected that they will. It will be street by street fighting, gun battles and taking over blocks building. Before they go in, the Israelis with their airstrikes are trying to hit, they say they're hitting terrorist command centres, they say they're hitting terrorist weapons depots. They will be trying to get as much infrastructure out of the way before they go in as soldiers. 300,000 reservists have been called up for this operation. Then the big question, and one of the reasons why Israel has avoided this until now, is what happens then if they disable Hamas's security apparatus and its governing system. What might emerge in its place? And Israel is very reluctant to reoccupy the Gaza Strip. It ended in failure. They pulled out in 2005, concluding that it was extremely costly and quite unworkable. And so they don't have a great appetite for reoccupying the Gaza Strip. It has not been under Israeli occupation since 2005. We're not really clear what the end game is here from the Israeli point of view, but the number one priority for many is the hostages.
Now, you mentioned the more than 2 million Palestinians living in that small space. It was already a difficult humanitarian situation before this fighting broke out. What can you tell us about the situation now on the ground and what we can expect?
Well, we know that supplies of food, water, gas, electricity have been shut off. So it's very difficult to see what their plight must be. It must be extremely difficult. Humanitarian agencies are very worried. The Gaza Strip, of course, is bordered by Israel on all sides, except in the south, where it's bordered by Egypt, which frequently closes off its border, meaning that the enclave is pretty much shut off from the world. We have heard very little from Egypt, whether they intend to open that border and allow in Palestinian refugees. It should be said that the Egyptian government is not a fan of Palestinian militants and will also be worried that militants might come into Egypt along with ordinary Palestinians. They are reluctant to get tangled up in this, but nevertheless, they are on that border. We will wait to see whether they say refugees can come into Egypt. The other consideration, as casualties pile up as this goes on, Israel is a democracy, unlike many of its neighbours, and it's possible that ordinary Israelis, after a while, will balk at the massive casualties on both sides and make their voices heard. But I think for the moment, the outrage and the sorrow is so great, we're hearing from Iris Meckler in Jerusalem, that their priority at the moment is getting their hostages and dealing with Hamas.
Angela Diffley, thank you very much for your analysis.